In this video, we're going to go over the installation process and some more details about our 280ZX front lip splitter that's designed for common aftermarket air dams. So this splitter that we're looking at right now is the 2-inch variety. We also have a 4-inch, and what that means is that this sticks out from an air dam roughly about 2 inches, and the 4-inch sticks out roughly 2 inches more, so for a total of 4 inches. These mounting slots here go into the core support, which will show you where that is on the car in a little bit. But one of the things I want to point out is that this splitter is designed and made for, a lot of the common 280ZX aftermarket air dams. But you do need to make sure that it's going to fit your particular air dam. And so we've included a lot of measurements in the product image on the website. So you can double check that and measure to different points to determine on your car that this is going to fit the way you want it to. On this particular one, we've got a couple extra holes than what it's going to come with on yours. Yours is going to come with these holes and slots. It's going to come with this hole and this hole right here. These two holes, you'll actually drill in it when you get it, and we'll go over that in a minute. These were for some testing purposes, and those won't be there on the splitter that you get. So next I'm going to touch base on some of this hardware, go over kind of how it lays out, what it's there for. Some of this is actually going to be extra. Some people will use more of it, some people will use less of it. So I'm going to go over this hardware next, and then after that we'll go over some of the mounting points on the car. So one of the things about the hardware I want to address first is the splitter support rods. These are 6061 aluminum splitter support rods, extremely attractive, well made. These are one of the shorter varieties of it. We'll make them available in, I believe, 3 different sizes. And so with these aren't included in the standard kit. It's an add-on option. So you can choose to get a pair of splitter support rods that will look like these, just in this length, or possibly longer. And when you get those, it is an add-on option, so there's an extra fee for that. If you decided that you didn't want to do that and you wanted to get your own, there are definitely less expensive options out there than these. And if you wanted to go a different route, you would just select in the drop-down menu that you don't want any. You still will need them to support the front of the splitter, but you definitely don't have to get the ones that we're providing as an option. And these 2 holes that you see right here, we don't include those in the splitter, because depending on the splitter support rods you choose and where you choose to mount them, you will need to drill the holes in the splitter to mount splitter support rods. This one, we were doing a little test fitting, and so we already have the holes drilled in there for where these would mount. So moving on from the splitter support rods, we have a lot of things going on here that is included in the standard splitter price with the installation hardware of this kit. We have our 90-degree L brackets, and so these guys here will mount to the splitter. These are slotted, the T is, so you can slide them back and forth, you can slide them up and down, you can actually even rotate these, and how you mount them to ensure you're getting them in the right location. You'll end up with 4 of these. The other one will mount right here. You'll end up with 4 of these that'll mount to the splitter itself. Some M6 screws, some washers that'll come up through the bottom side, washer on the top side, and then there's M6 nut, all metal lock nut that'll secure this down to your splitter. And then as far as the this eyelet, this is actually going to be mounted more like that, but these will actually bolt onto through that eyelet. There's some larger washers, some M8 bolts, and some M8 nuts, so you'll be able to lock that onto here. This one is going to mount to one of the tow hook bolts on the car. as well as this one. These guys here, you should just be able to use the standard turnbuckle. However, you will want to take out the right-hand thread side of it, and provided in the kit, there are jam nuts. And you want to thread on the jam nut, again, on the right-hand thread side. This end's left hand, so that way when you turn them, they'll either tighten and loosen together. And the reason we're doing this is so that way, once you get this positioned to where you want it, you can run this jam nut down, tighten it, and that's going to prevent these from moving and loosening as you drive it. And so that's going to be for this bracket that's going to mount to the a tow hook mounting bolt that I'll show you on the car here in a minute. And then on this one, it's also going to mount just at a different angle coming up toward the tow hook. And on this one, we don't have a provided jam nut because these come with a longer eye bolt. You need a little bit more length there to grab it. Again, this is the right-hand side thread, so you'll take out the right-hand side eye bolt that's in the turnbuckle and replace it with this longer one so you get a little bit more reach. And so you'll also notice that you have a lot of these long, I believe these are 80 or 90 millimeters, M6. And so with these guys, these are going to mount into the core support that lines up with this. Again, we'll show you where that's at on the car here in a minute. And often with the aftermarket air dams, they sit lower than the factory air dam and below the core support. So when you go to, try to lift this up a little bit, when you go to tighten this into position, you would have a gap here. And so we're going to use some of these large washers that are provided. And what we've got here are 1/2-inch aluminum spacers. And so that'll space you off a 1/2 inch, inch and a half, and you'll probably be an inch and a half, but depending on your application, if you find that this is too long, you might need to trim this bolt down, but you should find that it should be about right. And then these will tighten into the core support to hold this back section. They are slotted, so you can move it forward and back. I mean, this should protrude about 2 inches, but depending on your air dam, it might be a little bit different. Or you might prefer it, inch and a half rather than 2 inches. So you can actually adjust this and slide it forward and back to get the reveal on the splitter that you want. And because the way all these brackets mount with the adjustable turnbuckle, it gives you that ability to adjust it. And since these pivot and rotate, you have a lot of adjustability as far as if you're mounting, to this side, and the angle at which you turn this will affect the distance of how this is attached. And then once you get it all locked into place and it's symmetrical, you can then tighten down by turning the center of your turnbuckles and get that locked into place. When you do it, you want to make sure it's tight, but you don't want to over tighten it so much that you start to buckle everything on the car. So that kind of lines out a lot of the bits and pieces of the hardware. So next thing we're going to do is take a look at the underside of the car and kind of point out some of those pieces that we were mentioning so far in the video. So here we are underneath the 280ZX, and on the car we have at the shop, this is a standard air dam like the factory OEM one, and this is our OEM front lip splitter. The one that we developed on a customer car, and so we'll have pictures of the website that shows how that's fitted on there. But as far as getting underneath and looking at it, we wanted to do it on our car here at the shop, so it's up on the lift and it's easier to show you what we're looking at. And so one of the main things that I want to point out are these two screws right here. And when I was talking earlier about attaching the splitter to the core support, and you'd need the spacers, this is straight because the OEM air dam is higher. So most of the aftermarket air dams will sit down a couple inch or so lower. And so that's why we provide, the spacers. So that way the splitter would go in here, and then you can tighten it into these spots. And so when you're measuring your air dam to see if it's going to work with this splitter, one of the measurements that we give you, reference points, is those slotted holes on the splitter that go into the core support. And so when I've been referencing that, that's these two holes. So if you get underneath your car and you're like, okay, where are we talking about? It's these 2 points. And so what I like to do when I'm installing the splitter is put those 90-degree brackets on it, like I showed you earlier, a little bit loose so you can still pivot them and rotate them. And then with an extra set of hands, lift the splitter into place, figure out how many spacers you need to make this even, and then put those screws in. You can make it a little bit snug, but you don't need to make it tight, because you still will have some adjustability to shift forward and back, and even with a little bit of twisting to ensure that you can line it up the way that you want. So after that's in place, then I like to come over and start to do the turnbuckles. And so again, this is the OEM splitter. It's a little different, but this whole location's actually in the same spot. And so you have the 90-degree bracket. We have our bolts, washers, the turnbuckle here. You can see our jam nut that's in there. And then you run it up to this upper bolt, just retain the factory one, in the tow hook. And so you'll notice on this one that this is the circular hole in the 90-degree bracket, because this M10 bolt needs to fit through that. And then your T-slotted part will go here on as far as when you mount this. And then, so this is going to be very similar when you do the larger aftermarket splitter. The other turnbuckle will actually, the way we like to do it is mount it to here, and then you're running it forward and attaching it in here. On this one, it would run into the factory air dam because it actually pulls back, and most of the aftermarket ones jet out. So you actually do have room here to attach another bracket. And so basically you're going to do a very similar thing here, except for you're going to mount your turnbuckle from here and run it forward, and it's going to angle down more because of the lowered air dam. So you're going to get the two turnbuckles on this side, do the same thing on the other side, and then once you have that generally positioned, the next thing you would be doing is drilling the holes on the outer lip of the splitter to put your chosen splitter support rods on there. So we'll roll to the outside of the car, and again, even though this splitter and air dam's a little bit different, I can still point to a few things on this to give you some ideas. So here we are looking at the outer front on the 280ZX. And again, like I had said, this is a factory air dam, not the aftermarket. This is the OEM. So I don't want you to get confused and think that yours should look like this if you're looking to get this aftermarket air dam splitter. What I wanted to show you, however, is that, the lip that sticks out right here is going to be similar to what is sticking out on your particular setup. And so when we're talking about these splitter support rods, and you saw those holes that we had to drill in the front, they're going to be mounting, into the front here. And then the other end needs to anchor onto the car in a spot that's going to actually be able to support a lot of force. Because when you're driving, you get at speed, you get a decent amount of force pushing down on the front of the splitter. And so, like for example, in this car, we have our lightweight aluminum front bumper. However, this is not mounted in such a way that I would support a splitter off of it. So I know some guys like the factory one's big, it's heavy, and the way it's mounted to the chassis, you can hook a splitter support rod to that. Some other options that I know is that you can attach it to here and actually come inside and work on some different points where your bumper brackets mount. These aren't going to just accept the splitter support rod though, so you'd either need to drill or modify, make a bracket. I mean, there's lots of options. One of the things that I like is that potentially you can actually attach some of this to a tow hook. But again, you have to, and on the aftermarket air dam, this is going to stick out away from the chassis much further, So sometimes, an option might even be something like this, if you're dropping it down. But with these splitter support rods, you need to determine, okay, if you're going to get a 2-inch or a 4-inch and measure like about 1 inch or maybe 2 inches or 3 inches, depending on where you want to mount it into the splitter in front of the air dam, and then determine from that point where you want to mount it on the chassis. Measure that to determine how long of a splitter support rod you need. One thing to keep in mind is that if a splitter support rod says it's 12 to 14 inches and you're like, oh, okay, I'm at 14 inches, from here to here and we're good, but you actually are going to mount something at an angle, you actually need to take and add about 1.5 inches to that length, because this is coming straight out, versus if you put it down like this, you're getting that full length. And again, I've seen guys that like to attach to the factory bumper. Our lightweight aluminum is not going to be a good mounting point, but there's lots of chassis points that you can find and adhere to if you don't have the bumper or if you have the lightweight bumper. And again, you will need to use some form of splitter support rod to support the front of this. We have those turnbuckles and the core support bolts that are supporting, the back and a lot of the middle, but you're going to get too much flex on the front if you don't have the support rods. You can pick them in the drop down options. Just make sure that you pick the length you need for where you're going to mount it on your particular car. Or there are certainly cheaper options out there that you can get, and just order this without the splitter support rods. Just keep in mind that you will need to get some before you drive it. Please feel free, if you have any questions, to email us at sales@skillard.com. We love to try to help all of our customers be successful in their builds. So if you have a question, we'll do our best to answer it. We'll look back down here at our splitter, and these are available from Skillard.com.